Now is the time for change. Doing business in the 21st century is made possible with Ngongi, external and internal audit assurance providers. Log on to ngongi.com to find out more.
Investors have great power in the world. They send their investment monies in and out of countries and companies, and in so doing, affecting their future. Our expert guest today will talk about the role of investors. They are Leigh Cindy, Chief Executive of Unity Corporation, and Adrian Bertrand, Environmental, Social and Governance Manager of the Government Employees Pension Fund. I'm Leigh Roberts, and with me is Mervyn King. So Mervyn, do the big institutional investors rule the world?
Well, they don't rule the world, but they're certainly a driver of change. And I think if you look at the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment in our own country, the Code for Responsible Investment, the responsible investment drive actually can change corporate behavior. Because a company that's not listed wants to do an IPO, or a company that's listed wants to raise money by way of rights issues, the investor today, being linked to a CISA, would comply with the Code for Responsible Investment. So would be looking in the investment analysis at the ESG factors and asking questions about, have you done an integrated report, sustainability report, have you got a supply chain code of conduct, how it's been monitored. So certainly a company should be aware of these issues if they're in the capital raising business.
So even if an investor doesn't stem from responsible investing, I mean the power of the trillions of dollars going around the world, I mean it just can create change. So Adrian, do institutional investors rule the world?
They wield a lot of power on behalf of their members and beneficiaries. And they are the owners of capital at the end of the day. So a large institutional investor like a pension fund or an insurance company on behalf of their members gets to vote at company AGMs and determine the strategy for the company.
Is it Leila, your view?
Well, I would agree that they hold immense power with the assets that they own. Sadly, that they're not aware of the potential power that they have. That's a big thing. And I suppose one later would illustrate and show that many of them just simply do their fiduciary duty. We are owners, asset owners. Let's look where we can put the money our way, and they put it there and they leave it. Unfortunately, that's the point. Then they leave it to other managers to look after that money.
Yeah.
And that way they give away the power that
they're abrogating responsibility.
Exactly, that's it.
So is that a problem with pension funds these days? So first of all, they can abrogate, but secondly, how aware are they of the material issues that can affect their investment performance? And let me tell you that in the Global Risk Perception Survey of 2013, 7 of the top 10 global risks are social and natural capital. So how aware are pension funds of these? Mervyn?
Well, as you know, in December 2013, the International Integrated Reporting Council issued its framework. We talk about the 6 capitals, 2 of them being social and natural capital. And in social capital, it includes the ongoing relationships with the company's stakeholders. And the company should learn about the reasonable needs, interests and expectations of stakeholders, which informs management. Management should be informing the board, and the board should consider these needs, interests and expectations in developing strategy, because your strategy should meet the expectations of your stakeholders. And a company today that doesn't take account of natural and social assets, in my view, that board is failing in its duty of care to the company, because business, in fact, is at the junction of the economy, society and the environment.
So this is what they should do, Adrian. But do they?
Well, I think there's growing awareness, and I think it's been helped in South Africa in recent times from just thinking about Marikana and the role of labour. The importance of good stakeholder and employee relations. So I think both boards of companies, the investors that are investing in those companies, are becoming more and more aware of the role of these material ESG issues and how they can actually impact on financial performance at the end of the day. is enough attention being paid, and are these considerations actually changing the investment decision-making process? I think at a policy level there's a lot of commitment, but at implementation level there's still a lot of work that needs to be done by both South African and international investors.
Would you agree with that, Silele, that there's much more that can be done, that it's not commonplace right now?
Well, it's true, yes, I agree. It's not much commonplace, but there is awareness, there's growing awareness. This awareness may take different forms, and emphasis may also be slightly different. Others may emphasize the social nature of capital, because most times, or more often than not, you find that the asset owners, the investors, bring in the social assets and the national natural capital. That's why they will drive and put forth. They may not have looked at other considerations that will drive and bring about better performance for what they are investing. So there is growing awareness, and probably it may just be a difference of emphasis. What do they emphasize? Is it responsible? Is it sustainable? Is it impact investing? That may be that kind of thing. Then there's resistance that they meet when they now go and invest. Like Adrian said, with the board of directors of that particular company, investee company, then when they want to engage with the people who are the drivers of, shall we say, operations of that investee companies, then there's not much room for conversation and communication.
Okay, now we're going to get onto that in a short while, but I want to ask you about the influence. South Africa has quite enlightened pension fund regulations, which forces trustees to actually take a broader outlook. Have they had much influence on the way you invest?
Well, they do. They do. It may be to a limited extent, but like you rightly say, pension legislation really is a big enabler. I would say past 10 to 15 years. It's been an enabler. You get a lot of investors through their trustees swearing by the PF, was it PF 30? 130. That's kind of like their Bible that guides them on their fiduciary duties. So there is that use of that awareness, and the like I'm saying, the pension funds legislation is a big enabler for people to be able to make informed decisions about how they want to invest.
And Adrian, do you want to add to that?
I think it's been very helpful. It's allowed pension fund trustees in South Africa to consider ESG issues, because they can now say, you know, it's a regulatory requirement. Working hand in hand, Regulation 28 of the Pension Funds Act and the CRESA Code, helpful guidance to investors and specifically pension funds. But again, principles based, and we need to see more implementation and uptake of those principles.
And somebody cracking the whip. Okay, so let's go on to the real problem in the investment world. Actually, there are two as I see it. The one is the short-term nature of investment decisions taken by the company, excuse me, and the second is the short-term nature taken by investors because of the way they're paid. Short-termism in the company, Mervyn.
Well, short-termism, according to the FSB, was one of the contributors to the GFC. And the world is actually turning away from short-termism to inclusive or sustainable capitalism. And the whole premise of integrated thinking and the integrated report is longevity in value creation. Steer away from sustainable value creation, because people confuse sustainability issues with longevity of value creation. So it's absolutely critical that the asset owner, we were talking a minute ago, can delegate to a manager, but they can't abdicate their responsibilities. And so particularly, let's say, the trustees of a pension fund. One of the things that concerns me in South Africa, well intended, but with adverse consequences, is that in-house pension fund must have 50% of those trustees must be employees. And I'm not derogating from the capacity or skills of employees, but the average employee is not an investment analyst. So you find pension fund trustees sort of acknowledging what the managers advise without proper interrogation.
Well, let's just get Zitalele's opinion, because you invest for a whole lot of trade unions. What's your view on that one?
Well, to a large extent, yes. What is required is massive education and empowerment of the trustees. I think what Mervyn King saying is true. It's an ordinary employee. It's an ordinary employee who was elected on the basis of trust, on the basis of confidence that that person should go and represent them and sit on the board of trustees. That's a start. The next leg or the next level would be now to empower the trustees. Well, there's been growing trustee training that's going on. In fact, there's a lot of accredited trustee training that's taking place now. So much so that then it will change and shift the emphasis. Just to go back to the topic, yes, short-termism is what the trustees are taught or made to believe is what they... Remember, there's a high turnover among other things. This employee may be there in the company a year or two. For whatever reason, his division or her division is changed, the person is retrenched, then you bring in new trustees.
You have to start again.
You start again. But there's growing build-up to move away from short-termism, but it's still gripping and focusing the mind of a lot of the trustees and investors. And to say, well, look, you judge a manager by 3 months, 6 months, that basically, in fact, it goes against the grain of what a pension or retirement, well, we're using pension interchangeably. It's pension or provident fund, let's not quibble. It goes against, I mean, it's a long-term investment horizon that a pension fund normally has. But then the people that you send out there to represent you have got this short-term view. Okay, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, no, this manager is not performing. Then they want.
Yeah, and isn't that the essence of the problem, Adrian, that their incentive bonuses are based on their actual investment performance, short-term?
Quite correct. So you've got long-term investors like pension and provident funds with a long-term investment horizon, yet their service providers and the companies that they're investing in are chasing quarterly profits at the expense of long-term true value creation. I think we are seeing more ESG and long-term value creation questions coming from the boards, but it's not included as part of quarterly monitoring. They're not being included in the mandates with the service providers, and I think that's the next step to start seeing true implementation happening.
Mervyn, what's your view? How do we get the investment world to change?
Well, the actuary will actually calculate what is needed short, medium and long term, what you have to pay out. So if the investor is vesting only on a short term basis, actuarially, they're clearly failing in their duty to medium and long-term payouts. So you need some short-term investment, but you've got to have long-term investment, because actuarially, I don't know, a fund might have a 38-year horizon, for example.
But how do you get away from paying investment fund managers on a quarterly basis?
Well, I think that is a change in remuneration, because you can have bottom line, but you should also have the investments that they're investing in. The question is, how does the company make its money? What were the positive enhancements on the impact of how the company makes its money on society? What were the negative impacts? How in your investment have you interrogated and made sure the company is eradicating the negative ones and enhancing the positive ones? That's how you should determine. So you actually have those three aspects determining bonuses, not just the financial hurdle.
And it's a complete mindset
Because it's
change.
it's like sitting on a one-legged stool.
It's going to collapse any moment. We're going to a short break now, but do stay with us as there's more on the powerful role of investors when we come back.
Ngonki has the professional capacity to deliver on your external and internal audit assurance requirements. Visit ngonki.com